So before we start tonight, I do want to just thank you for coming out on a Tuesday night. I know you got a lot of things to do, but we're here to do the work, so we're going to prioritize this. Big thank yous to Auburn Avenue Research Library for hosting us tonight. Can we give a shout out? And then also big gratitude to Kate and Kamau for allowing us to do a simultaneous recording of my podcast, Lady Don't Take No. So make some noise so all the listeners can hear you. So I always just want to jump in, and I started off talking about a pandemic, and that seems controversial still these days. I'm not really sure why. Why is it controversial to say that we're still in a pandemic? We are. Thank you for wearing your masks. But I do got to ask you, what has your pandemic life been like? I mean, look, we got Rona. She brought her cousins and her in-laws. Mm-hmm. And we didn't know about this. And now we're all just trying to live in the same house and, get along. So what has your pandemic life been like? Kay, why don't you start off? Tell us, what's it been like? And have you developed any unique habits live and direct from Miss Rona?
Okay, I'm not going to lie. I listen to your podcast every week, and it got me through the panorama.
Thank you.
And so, have I practiced my answers to these exact questions? Yes, I have.
You have, yes.
Yeah. Do I remember the super witty, cool
not.
answers? No, I don't remember. But my pandemic life has, at this point, it feels like it's been a bunch of different lives. It's been going on for a long time. There was the part where my kids weren't at school.
Oh yeah, that part.
The part where they were at home. Uh-huh. That felt like it took a million years. Uh-huh. There was the part where we were writing this book together. Kamau was really the only person I saw outside of my immediate family in person for almost a full year.
Oh yeah.
No, it's what makes our book so good. But also, I went through a lot of personal transformation during the pandemic too. So there was a whole part where I was getting a divorce and having my new partner.
Just that part.
Yeah,
my
new partner moving in and restarting my life and transforming everything.
Do you understand me?
I did a lot.
Okay, so we have been connecting telepathically, clearly through Ladies' Love Notes, obviously.
I'm a listener.
Okay.
Yeah, long-time listener, first-time talker.
Divorces unite, and
yes.
I definitely have to hear about this new round. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It happened a little fast for me. The divorce to the new partner, but I've accepted it.
Thank you.
I like Lauren a lot.
Yeah, thank you. Well, she was around for a long time. Anyway, I got to say her name. I got to say hi to Lauren because she's really the listener. And I
feel like you guys don't need me.
Thank you for coming, Kamau.
Yes, it's been so nice. Now, stage left.
And wait, I have to answer did I develop any new habits live and direct from Miss Rona? I actually, though it's been tested, I think I developed a new way to be patient with my children.
You know what? That is a superpower.
Yes.
Legit.
It's been tested many times.
I'm with this.
I developed new strategies for that.
I'm with this. Okay, so we're going to come back to all of this. There was so much juiciness in there.
Part 2.
Now you got me feeling like Wendy Williams. Shout out to Wendy. How you doing? Okay, Kamau, what has your quarantine life been like? And tell me about some new habits you've developed live and direct from Miss Rona and her homie Pox.
I think I messed up during the quarantine, that I thought that things were going to be quiet for a lot longer. So I started up a bunch of new things because I was like, I'm not going to be traveling. Clearly, we're not going to be traveling. So we started this book, and I started a couple other things. And then that October, CNN was like, time to go back on the road.
Yo.
I was like, but we didn't. There's no vaccine. Oh, my contract. So I got to see airports that were empty and everybody was running for everybody and face shields. I mean, that was me. All the way through. I've gotten to see the whole, the country through the airports the whole way through. To now, I'm like, man, we just back to regular, huh? Just no big deal. So yeah, I definitely the last 2 years of my life, and I was just reflecting on this recently. Recently was the 10-year anniversary of my first TV show, Totally Biased.
Shout out.
Yeah.
Hey.
The little show that didn't. Thank you. That's why it was canceled. Even in a room of 14 people, only 3 people knew it. And so it's really been this is the first, now that the book is out, it feels like a huge, okay, there's like a little bit of like a breath that I can take now. So me and my family just took like our first trip to Martha's Vineyard, where we got to see I know Atlanta has fancy blacks, but I'm not comparing and contrasting. I'm just saying that like that's like a fancy black convention.
You know what? My name is Bennett, and I ain't in it. I'm new here. So
Okay,
I
yeah.
ain't
No,
trying
I'm
to
just
start
saying
no
it's like a
trouble.
convention of fancy black folks there, and it was just like this real like my kids and my wife were there, and it was just this real like there's just a level of like a concentrated level. It's weird. It's Martha's Vineyard, an island. A concentrated level of black excellence that even though living in Oakland and being in Atlanta, that I'm not used to being around.
Yeah.
And it was really like spiritually refreshing in a way that I was not prepared for.
Yeah.
Like one night we went to the beach and here's the thing, there's a bunch of black people on the beach, but it's not the black beach. Some people know what I'm talking about. And you're just there, and at some point, some reverend was like, all right, everybody, let's circle up and pray. And I was like, I guess we're doing this now.
That's exactly what you're doing.
Exactly. Like what would be the dude from CNN who's like, nah.
You bet not.
And so there was a level of like, recently there was a level of like refresh and spiritual refresh that I was not anticipating that I really appreciated. Yeah.
I love this. There's so much to talk about. I was telling y'all earlier, I was on Martha's Vineyard when Charlottesville happened. Needless to say, I haven't been back since.
You felt like, I gotta go.
I was like, I feel like I'm in a real live rendition of Get Out, and I don't want that, actually.
Yeah.
I also wasn't in the Oak Bluff side. I was at the other side.
That's what you learned about the Oak Bluffs where the black people are. You were in the side of town. We don't have to mention it, but
That's how I learned about the sides.
It's really.
I wasn't on the right
it's
side.
It's really strange. It's a little bit like the TV show Lost.
Correct.
Where there's like, oh, the others live over here.
Correct.
Except it's the black others.
Correct.
You're like, oh, I think I'm gonna hang out with the black others instead of you
Correct.
people over here running away from polar bears. Yeah.
And you have limited options of getting on and off. You
Yeah,
have to
no,
understand.
it's funny. There's this sort of this. It reminded me a little bit. And it is an island, so it reminded me a little bit. I couldn't help but think about Hawaii, as an island
Yeah.
where because the people of Martha's Vineyard, there are native Hawaiians, and there are people of Martha's Vineyard who would say they're natives, but they're not natives. They're in the
Don't
way
get
that-
started, Bess.
And then I think about the Sea Islands off of South Carolina, where black folks basically, once slavery was ended, they were like, white people leave. And and so like we're able to retain a lot of the West African culture and language and develop their own language. And just that sense of like, when we're left to our own devices and we can relax, things feel a lot different.
Did you see Obama?
No, I think I got there. I know he showed up at Questlove's thing, but I did not see him. I did go to a place that had an Obama burger, but I didn't order it.
Did you get any passes because people thought you were Quest?
Okay, so here's the thing. This is
You
so.
know I had to ask. You know I had to ask.
First of all, Ms. Garza, I get some passes for being W. Kamau Bell. First of all,
Fair enough. Fair enough. Fair
enough. as if you were not saying. But yes, I did. No, here's the thing that's painful for me. People get me and Quest confused all the time. I've learned to accept it, but it's painful when black people do it. It's one guy was like, "Hey, what's up, Q Love?" Oh, so you know me well enough to abbreviate it?
Yeah.
But you don't know it's me? You don't know who he is? Yeah. So, and apparently it's happened to him a lot too, because it makes me feel better. I thought it was just because I was the less famous one, but apparently it happens to him too. But when it's black people, it just feels like,
You know he don't let people call him Q Love.
No, exactly.
You
Q Love.
already know.
That didn't even work on me. I know it don't work on him.
Listen, it's a fact. All right, so look, we're about to get into a whole conversation about what it means to do the work. But I was thinking about this on the way over here. I mean, we keep having all these conversations about how polarized this country is. And then we go, how did we get here? Like it's a new phenomenon. Lots of us know America's been polarized for a very long time. And it makes us feel better to think that we're not. There's also been a whole lot of like pushes since 2020, perhaps, maybe even a little bit earlier, that was like, we have to understand where people are coming from. Understand where the conspiracy theories and the misinformation and the disinformation and the, kids locked in a basement below a pizza joint
that doesn't have a basement
comes from. So I want to find a middle ground here in the spirit of my friend who shall not be named. I want to find common ground. And I want to ask, talk to me about a time when you felt really, really, really strongly about something. You were convinced this is right, this is the way it is, and you changed your mind. What happened?
That's a good question.
Why, thank you.
That's probably the hardest question anybody's ever asked.
This is what it means to do the work.
Yeah.
So I would say
that
this, like, I'm not the kind of person, and maybe this is known from how my career goes, who's going to be like, you don't know what you talking. That's just not.
No, you sat down with the Klan.
Yeah, I'm
What are
not.
you
Yeah, it's
talking
not
about
like it's
even?
not in me to be that sort of like. Well, you don't ever. I will just quietly seethe. Is how I go. That's how I go. But so I'll say this: moving from Chicago in 1997, I was 24 years old. I know. I was 24, and I moved to the Bay Area to do. I moved to San Francisco to do comedy because it's a great stand-up comedy scene. And I was 24, and I ended up living in Oakland and working in Berkeley, like at one of the school supply stores. And just that, instead of living in San Francisco, I ended up sort of doing comedy nights in San Francisco, working in Berkeley, living in Oakland. So that's like a little triangle that a lot of people in the Bay Area don't get. And as much as it all sounds like the Bay Area, maybe, it's like, it's not, yeah.
They're islands.
They're islands, yes. And so I got to see lots of different types of people and just sort of got to be, like, through osmosis, just like, be around things like, I don't know if that's right. But then just being around it enough to be like, I guess it's okay. So for me, it was really a sense of like just being in rooms with lots of different types of people and hearing things that I didn't agree with or thought were confusing or didn't make any sense. And then over time being like, well, they haven't been struck by lightning by God yet, so I guess it must be good, you know. And I'm exaggerating a little bit, but just the idea being that like what I thought was weird or strange. And I mean, we can go down from like, I mean, you know, in Chicago, I think I knew one openly gay person, you know, and that's Angie. She's a lesbian.
You had to whisper.
And all the dudes. She's a lesbian. You can't even really talk to her. You know what I mean? Wow. To like all the way to suddenly being in the Bay Area where it's like if you only know one, you find out you're not a nice person.
Correct.
So, you know, and so the idea being that like I just sort of like, so there'd be ideas of like issues of like gayness or how gayness is or how gay people are out with their gayness or how they are with each other, or going to the Folsom Street Fair where everybody's naked with their balls wrapped up in a thing, and you're just like, and it's like, I paid $9 to see this. Like just sort of being around these things that you just sort of go, I sort of take it in, and over time just like, huh. And down to like, I mean, and probably the biggest one for me, and this has been in the last 10 years, is like starting to really understand, or not understand, starting to really investigate my understanding of the trans identity, you know, of people who are trans.
Shout out to you. Dave Chappelle seems to have missed this point. I said it. What? He missed it. I could have said other things. I was being nice.
And so for me, when I hear people who don't understand it, I feel like a lot of this is like an indicator of like, oh, you're not really like out in these streets. You're not out here just because if you just are, because this is the way it happens with most stuff. If you're just around people, I mean, I think New York City is a great example of that. Of like, people are just around all sorts of different types of people, and so all they care about is that guy runs a good bodega on some level. They're not worried about who he's praying to, or you know, at its most basic. And so for me, I think that like, you know, so every so often like Kelly, you know Kelly, who I work with, Kelly Rafferty is like on the leading edge of a lot of like feminist thought. And so sometimes I'll say something, she'll be like, well, Kamau, if you say it like that, it's going to sound like fat phobic. I'm like, fat phobic? Look at me, I can, you know. And then she'll be like, and I'm like, huh. And at the time, that huh is not saying I totally agree and it totally makes sense to me. It's like, huh, I'm gonna sit with that for a little while. And I'm gonna hear more, and you're gonna send me some links, and I'm gonna look those things up, and I'm gonna pay more attention. And over time, I will sort of. So it's really like, to me, the stance is not initially. I mean, I think as a kid it was like, but its stance is like, I don't know anything about that. Let me just sit with it for a minute. So for me, I can't really think of, especially in the last, I'd say since '94, I have a hard time thinking of sometimes I was on the opposite side of somebody. It mostly was like, I don't know what you're talking about, so I'm going to be quiet. And even if I don't agree with you, I'm going to be quiet.
That's powerful. That's a start, right?
I mean, what you're talking about is growth, right? Which is ideally a thing that we're all doing all the time. And I think what's so great about that question, Alicia, is that I think it gets to what we talk about a lot in the book, because one of the questions we get a lot is, how do I talk to my racist so-and-so, whether it's your uncle, or your neighbor, your high school friend.
Your governor.
How do I, but you're right, your governor.
Yeah, I'm sorry, your current governor.
Yes, temporary. But like, how do I get so-and-so to change their mind?
Yeah.
How do I get so-and-so to change their mind about X? And there's a lot of people that I want to change their minds about X. But then I always think about it in terms of like, well, would I change my mind? What would it take to get me to change my mind about what I believe about the right to bodily autonomy and an abortion? Who's going to change? That's not going to change, right? So that is the way I've always tried to approach thinking about change and change making, is how deep-seated my beliefs are, and what would it take to get me to shift. And I don't think it's so much, for a lot of people, it's not about changing a mind entirely or like completely flipping an ideology, right? It's about how we grow and how we understand and how we accept things that are new. So I think my answer, as I had time to think, because you did a nice long answer, so I got to think about it.
That was a way for her to
Thank
say, you talk too much.
No,
You saw that, right?
it was perfect.
You saw that, right? She said, you did a nice
No,
long
I
answer.
appreciated it.
You always do, Kamau.
No.
That was another one of your classic nice long answers.
He shares the airtime very well. Thank you. No, you know what it made me think of is I don't think this is so much me changing my mind, but more of me understanding and growing. And I think I'm a big time know-it-all, and I think I always have been. I asked my mom; she would verify that. Virgo, know-it-all.
Shout out Capricorn, same thing.
Yeah. But I think that there was a time early on in my early 20s, and I think I was involved in a lot of kind of social justice and activism work. I went to UC Santa Cruz. I grew up in the Bay Area.
Yep.
I grew up very steeped in a lot of this, and I was like anti-racist, and I was a feminist, and I was all these things. But I didn't understand my whiteness, and I didn't understand my position as a white woman in the space I took up, and I had a lot of assumptions about what I knew, and a lot of it was not based on lived experiences, because I lived and I worked and I went to school in predominantly white institutions. And it wasn't until I graduated from undergrad and I moved to Oakland and I got a job where I was the only white person on a large staff of educators and dancers and performers. And that was a huge shift for me. And it didn't flip the way I understood everything necessarily, but being the only white person in this space, having bosses for the first time in my life, having a boss who was black, having all these colleagues, having everybody I was working with was black or Latino, that really started to shift. It basically, it's like, theory and practice, right? Like all these ideas that I had from my like great college education and all these lofty ideals I had were really like actually something I was finally living. So I think that was a big shift for me.
I love that.
Can I give? I know my answer was long, but can I add an addendum?
Of course.
Because I just realized there's a thing that recently happened. So this past weekend on United Shades, we did an episode about the land back movement, indigenous people in this
I
country.
seen it. It was good.
It was
Excellent.
This season we're doing some things. And so I would say that on first blush, hearing indigenous people want the land back, you start thinking about, does that mean my house? So that was certainly a response I had in and of myself when I heard land back. I support all your issues, but is there a carve out for my house? And so for me, that was my reaction. And then I sort of had this moment of like, and this is why it's so great for me to do the show, of like, why don't you listen to what they're saying before you start to do like this? And all over online, I've been tweeting about it all the last week. I can see people like, that doesn't make any sense because of blah, 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 blah. And it's like, oh, you didn't watch the thing, you didn't read the article. Yeah. I linked to an article. Somebody was like, I don't know, did you do this? Could you read the article? I'm not going to read the article. Okay.
Okay,
right.
Well,
then we're done talking. Then we're done talking. So for
Correct.
me, but that's a classic example of like hearing that sounds like I'm perceiving it initially as a threat to me. And that's like, well, why don't you read up on it and learn about it? And one of the great things that came out of it was because I get to do the show and fly around and talk to people. I talked to Nick Tilson and Crystal Tubols of the Indian Collective. And they both said basically like, if you're assuming that we're going to do to you, the colonizer, what you did to us, that's the wrong assumption.
Correct.
And it was like, oh, of course. And also the assumption is like, we want the land back because we're going to take better care of it than you are. People who are bringing polio back.
Hello?
Like we wouldn't be bringing polio back. So the idea being that like that's a great example of like as soon as I heard it, I support indigenous activists. Got to go to Standing Rock, but that's the thing that initially made me go like this, just because I didn't know what they were talking about until I actually did the reading, as they say.
I love y'all. Okay.
I love you.
We have so much to talk about. I just want to start by giving a shout out to this. Do y'all have this? It's pretty fresh. So, I got this inquiry from two people I really like. They happen to be named Kamau Bell and Kate Schatz. They were like, hey, would you write the intro? And I was like, what is this some like, what is this? What's happening?
And the person's like, what was it? It's not written yet.
Right, and we're all from the Bay, so you have to understand this is common. These are common conversations. But one of the things that I really, really appreciated about this, and you were describing it to me, and I was like, I'm saying yes because I love y'all. Then I got this thing in the mail, baby. I was like, oh, these are things I could do on conference calls. These are things I could do with my nieces and nephews. I want to color in this book. I want to pull all the things out. Oh, and I'm also reading what you have to say. You start off by saying, this book is for white people. I was like, well, now, y'all just want to jump in like that? I mean, how did you decide that this was necessary, and why did you make that really bold statement? This book is for white people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
okay, now you know good well we gonna start with you.
Yeah, hey, I'll take it. Well, so here's the thing, and as we've answered that question a lot, and I think there's a lot of ways we can answer it that are all true, but one of the things I've been saying and think a lot about is most books are for white people. Most media is for white people. And in the industries, the publishing industry pretends that's not the case, kind of, right? But when when big publishers, we got a nice book deal, we got a good publisher. There's it's a whole thing, and every publisher in 2020 wanted an anti-racist book on their list. Everybody wanted to check that box and make sure that they had the book, right? Because that's what was on the bestseller list, and that's what was selling at the time, and that's the reality of these industries. So I think part of it, just coming out and saying this book is for white people, felt like getting ahead of the question, right? It felt like let's just put it out there and say, like, again, this is what books are going to be fucking aimed at anyway. And then we're going to say it's also for all kinds of other folks. But when it comes to talking about dismantling white supremacy and figuring out how to talk about racism, like, it's white people that we need to be talking to and who need to be doing this work and who need to be talking about it. I think as we've been happy to realize, like, all along, and you've been referenced a lot as we've been putting this book together, and Kamau will say, like, I want, so-and-so to open it up and learn a lot, but I want Alicia Garza to be able to pick it up and be like...
Yeah, by the way, so-and-so is, I want my white mother-in-law to pick it up and be like, oh, my goodness, well, all right, okay. And I want you to be like, all right, this is the same reaction you had, that we were always in that, like, Oakland frame of mind of, like, thinking about who, like, the person who needs it, who has never been talked to this way before, and the person people like you who read it and go, maybe feel like finally somebody's getting through to these people in a way that maybe that other work could not. Mm-hmm. And again, this is not meant to supplant all the other work. It's your book is a reference in here. All these other books, the New Jim Crow, how to be an anti-racist, these are all necessary books, but sort of the argument being that, like, these are all ways to dismantle structural and systemic racism.
Mm-hmm. There's also a way that it's hard to escape, but we use a collective pronoun all the time to be like, we need to talk about race, right? Like, okay, yeah, but like, what is that we? And that's like why we wrote the book. The book is a conversation between Kamau and I, in part because that's fun, and it's really the conversation we were having, but also, like, we're not gonna write as we. We have really different experiences with this. So this idea that, like, hey, everybody, let's all talk about this as if we're all one kind of unified group having one same experience with race and racism, that's not accurate. So let's really name who really needs to talk about it. And that's, again, I think it's yet another thing that white people are not used to, is being like, this is for you. We're used to a lot of things being for us, but they're usually, like, really great things, not challenging criticism.
And I think for me, it's also about, like, how United Shades works. I'm aware that the core audience of CNN is basically, like, older white people, and yet I'm regularly in the show not talking to those people. So there's a way in which the book is written where like, this is for this group, this is for this group, this is for me and you. And I do that whether it's stand-up or the book, to be clear about, because I don't want some black person to pick this up and see you don't understand racism and be like, who is this mother? And so if we say at the top of the book, look, a lot of this is going to be for white people, but we believe that no matter who you are, you're going to find stuff in here. If you see something that tells you something you think is basic, you're like, well, that part's not for me.
Right.
But it doesn't mean that you necessarily picked up a book that doesn't have anything for you.
Well, here's what I really love about this book, and also, yes, because we're tired of talking about it. We talk about race all the time. We're like, can we just not? We just trying to live. We just trying to function, as we say in the Bay. You know, we just trying to function. Is this like a personal? Okay. Anyways,
I get it.
We're just trying to function. But for a lot of us, we went through this, well, twice now in the last decade. We went from all lives matter.
You love Michael Jordan. You take that personally, don't you?
I actually do.
Yeah.
To Black Lives Matter, long live George Floyd. I got my sign in my window, you know, my neighborhood, it's like, love is love, Black Lives Matter, science is real. I'm like, I am the only black person in this neighborhood. This is really deep. What does this mean? And now we're kind of at this point, right, where we're like, all right, I went to the protests, I got my sign, you know, and when we start asking...
My Zoom background with all the books looks good.
My Zoom background. But still, when we start asking questions about what has shifted, folks go, well, I mean, I was at the protests and I gave money. That's enough. Now it's on you people. Get to work. What I love about this is it's like a very interesting way of being personal with the work that you're doing. And it doesn't actually require you, right, to like announce your allegiances or all the things you don't know. And I actually kind of find that one of the reasons that people don't want to do the work is because they're scared of messing up. You're scared of making mistakes, right? You're like, I'm going to say something wrong. If I go too into it, you know, I let my guard down a little bit. I'm going to use the wrong term, and then I'm going to be outcast, and then people are going to drag me on social media, wherever you are. So talk to me a little bit about that piece. Like, how do we understand anti-racist work as making a bunch of mistakes?
I mean, I love that description of it. You know, I think I might work that into how we talked about it a little more. Yeah, it is. It should be making a bunch of mistakes. And then the best thing that you can do with a mistake is to make it and then to understand that you made it and then to repair whatever harm was done, whoever or whatever was harmed, and then to figure out how to do it better next time. Like, that's how we grow and how we, you know, move on. And like, you're not going to know, look, someone asked earlier in an interview that we did, you know, why is it so hard for white people to talk about race? And there's a lot of reasons, I think. But I think a core reason is that we're just not taught to. Like, no one showed us how or told us how. There's not a lot of models for how to talk honestly and openly about it. And so we're figuring it out. And that means we're going to mess up. But again, when you stop after that first time that you say the wrong thing, or if you stop because you're just so anxious about getting it wrong, you're not going to figure it out. It's like literally anything that you're trying to get better at. No one picks up the ball of yarn and those needles and like makes a scarf. Mm-hmm. That's including myself, and I've actually really tried. Correct. But like, me too. You know, but like you have to keep trying. You know, and and we talk about that in the book. You know, what to do when you mess up. You have to keep working at it.
I mean, I think so much of the issue is also that many of us, especially of a certain age, not, you know, maybe not the Gen Z kids, but if you're white, you were taught racism wasn't your problem. Mm. That's black folks' problem. Mm. Man, they had a lot of racism happen to them over there, and they're working on it. Then they had that guy give that speech. Then they had that president.
Not that guy. Not that guy.
And then it's a problem that's over there. And I think one of the best expressions that I heard was Pastor Michael McBride from the Bay. It's all going to be references to the Bay. Said that white people have to stop reaching for whiteness too. That the idea of being like you're regularly reaching for your whiteness as a shield, as a way to get exclude privilege, as a way to get something, as a way to sort of move through the world, and you're not even aware of it. And until you're aware of it, and that's what the book is also. It starts with like one of the early exercises is called check your privilege, which is like look at yourself. What privileges do you have? And some of those are skin privileges. But some of those are like, do you have a strong Wi-Fi signal at your house? Like we learned during the pandemic, that's a privilege. That you could be on those Zoom calls or have 8 people in your house all on your Wi-Fi because you got the good package. And so the idea being that like there's ways in which I think white people have been acculturated, and also, exactly, very few of us were taught an accurate, appropriate history of this country. Very few of us.
That's right.
And so that's now I think many of us at school, they weren't teaching us the accurate history. And then we get home and our family would be like my mom would be like, what did they tell you?
Right.
No.
Yeah, I know mom's was.
Yeah, for sure. My mom was definitely like, no.
She was like, now listen, sit down.
Yeah. She would do that for my African American history class. What did she tell you? So the idea being that like many of us were not taught, many of us across the board were not taught an accurate history of this country. And so you don't even know how bad it is.
That's
so
right.
you think that slavery thing, maybe the Native Americans, but you don't realize the depth of how bad it is. Like
Right.
I keep referencing this episode because I always reference the thing I saw last. I'm that guy. But like, to me, when you find out that like, okay, genocide Native Americans, that's bad. But then American government made treaties with Native Americans. And then you ask, well, how many treaties did the American government keep of the ones they've made? 0. So that's like, you thought that was bad, that the genocide was bad, then everything that happened after it was also bad. I think we're not really even at the depth. And so this is what I'd say for the book. There's a lot of like, you may be somebody who has a job as an activist, you may be every day working in anti-racism. I believe there are things in here, whether it's facts or ways of talking about it, that you may be, like you said, that you're able to go, oh, I can use this.
Yep.
And we encourage you to use it and make copies of it. Copyrights be damned.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
you know.
And actually, I want to add, so to go back to what you said about the Black Lives Matter, and thank you for that. I just want to like very publicly thank you for everything you've done, right? And the putting above signs, like our book, the first thing that happens when you open this book is your first assignment, there's a poster that says end white supremacy. And it's a pull-out poster with a little perforated line, and that's your first assignment. And I want to say that when we were first putting the book together, the sign was going to say Black Lives Matter at first. And we were like, you know what? Like, again, where we live, we see that sign a lot.
Yep.
And we were like, let's take it up a notch.
That's right.
And
Is there a new sign? Because that one seems pretty safe now.
and then we have a note on the back. The back of this is like, okay, here's your assignment. Put this up somewhere public, et cetera, et cetera. And also, really, that's not shit. Like, that's just a sign. And now that sign is your reminder of the work that you're going to do. But I like this also because, like you said, you know, all the arguing and the equivocation with Black, like what are you going to say? Don't end white. Well, you don't agree?
Yeah.
Okay, then don't put up the sign. But if you agree, then like, here you go. We got you a sign.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting because so much of how we talk about race and racism, if and when we talk about it, is about people being mean to each other. Right? So when you talk about being anti-racist, people, oh, of course I'm anti-racist. I'm not mean. I'm a really nice guy. I'm a really nice person. People like me. My family likes me. They still talk to me. You know, I wave at people on the street. I just don't believe that, Black people should be able to vote freely.
But I'm very nice.
But
I'm very
person.
nice.
I'm a good person.
I'm very nice. I just don't think you people should participate, right?
The internet tells me that there's been a lot of scandals with
A lot of
voting.
scams. I mean, you handing out food. What's next?
Yeah.
So, shout out to Brian Kemp. Yeah, I said it. I'm new here. I can say
Maybe
stuff like that.
Maybe a shout down of Brian Kemp.
So, look, I want to do a few things here. Number one, I want to do a quick lightning round because we're going to put this whole do the work to the test. Y'all ready for that? Okay. Y'all ready? Stretch. Now I get to be Steve Harvey. Okay. You ready?
Man,
Shout out to Steve.
That pays well.
You know what? He's looking good these days.
I've been in a lot of hotels lately. I'm watching a lot of Family Feud, so
You know what? I'm with
I'm
it.
ready.
I'm
Put
with
me in,
it.
Final Feud. Let's go.
Yeah. Okay. You ready? defund the police or refund the police? I had to.
Defund the.
I'm sorry.
We need to consult.
We're gonna go with
We have
defund.
different answers.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going with defund.
Can we go with abolish?
What happened? I mean, wasn't that like the devil's prayer like a year ago? They were like, oh my God, defund the police. But as soon as like Trump gets run up on, now we need to
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
defund the FBI.
Yeah.
Defund
Yeah.
the FBI.
I'm like,
Tweet
They've
that.
suddenly lost faith.
Okay, flats or drums? We're in Atlanta.
Drums.
Okay,
Flats.
right answer. I can do that too. All right, you ready for this?
Oh no, people are like.
They were like,
we're
wait a
breaking up
minute.
couples out there.
I know.
Did you say flats, honey? I didn't know. Drums? Who are you?
I mean, the correct answer is it depends on where they're from, but we'll come back
deep.
to that at some other point. Diversity, equity, inclusion, or anti-racist?
Anti-racist.
Anti-racist.
Boom.
Yeah, I get mad
Yeah.
right here even the idea of that. Don't worry about that baby can make his. I mean, it's your podcast. I should say that. But no,
All right.
we're surrounded.
Boston Tea Party or January 6th insurrection?
Can we go with John Brown?
We can.
Harper's Ferry.
Between those two, I guess Boston Tea Party. I guess. I mean, the idea of the Boston Tea Party was good. I don't know if they were thinking about black folks, but yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. No taxation without representation, and then we built a country
Yo.
with taxation without lots of representation.
I mean, it's a whole thing.
No taxation without representation, but gerrymandering and packing and cracking and their electoral college. But then, no taxation without representation.
You're welcome. Okay, tell us the story about how y'all even came to do this. Like, this whole book is a conversation between them, and honestly, when you read it, you're gonna feel like you're just sitting in between them, going like this.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So, where did the idea even come from for it to be in this kind of form?
I still believe, and I'm pretty sure it's true, right? Like we both had the idea for a workbook. The origin story, we've known each other for a long time. We've been friends, again, as we've mentioned like 80 billion times so far. Everything happens in the Bay. We've known each other in the East Bay for a long time.
In the same way that, like, we all know each other.
Yeah,
Like,
we're all
you're in
mutual fans.
You're all in the same circles. You're all fans of each other's work. You show up at the same galas or nonprofits or rallies or protests.
I don't go to galas.
I don't know why I said galas. I wouldn't even go to a gala. But I've seen you would go to a gala.
I would.
Yeah. So, but you're in the
the
same
fashion.
sort of like, oh, there's a fundraiser for. Oh, look, you're here. Oh, I'm speaking after you. There's just a sort of and then you get to hang out. You know.
Yeah.
So in the wake of the murder of George Floyd at the end of May 2020, Kamau sent me an email that literally said, help me with these white people. And it said, I am all these white people and he said, not just regular whites, but the like important whites.
I might have said the fancy
The
ones.
fancy whites
Fancy whites.
are coming to him and asking,
What can I do?
That's how it felt too. That's really actually how it felt. That was all over my phone. Like,
Yeah.
are you serious?
Yeah.
and so he said, can you help me? Can you help me with these white people? And I said, yes, send me your white people. Like, let's talk. And then he took it very literally, and a few days later texted me, and I was driving with my kid in the car. I got a text from him. I was on 880 near downtown Oakland.
Yes.
And the text said, I'm going on Conan O'Brien in 10 minutes. Can you talk? And I was like, well, of course I can, Kamau. Let me just pull over in downtown Oakland, which is boarded up because there's been people in the streets every night since the murder of George Floyd.
That's right.
And let's have a brainstorm with my kids screaming in the backseat.
Yep.
And we talked, I mean, about what do you say to Conan O'Brien that you haven't already said to a million other
Yeah, because that
people?
week after, for that couple weeks after George Floyd was murdered, like every talk show was trying to get all the black people to come on and talk about racism.
I had never seen so many black people on TV as I
No,
did
it was
in
like,
that period.
and it was sort of like, I mean, and great, but also it was like I felt like I'd done enough of them by the time I called her, that I was sort of tired of having the same conversation where they sort of like have the like, just talk to me about it.
Yeah.
And I would talk and they'd be like, yeah, that's bad. And so I was like, what can I do with Conan that is different than having the same conversation?
Yeah.
And one of the things you said, I don't know if you remember, was like, can you ask him a question? And I was like, oh, I never even thought about that before. And so the question basically was like, what can you do? Instead of, because I think there was a lot of like, it's time for the conversation. And Kate was like, no, it's time for action. We've already had the time for the conversation.
Yep.
And so it became about like putting it back on him and saying, we need you to do more. You're a person of all this privilege. How many black people do you have on your staff? Blah, blah, blah. And our brainstorm for the conversation, my conversation with Conan, it became clear like, we should there's something here we can do.
Yeah. And he said, let's write a book. And why would I say no to that? It was the pandemic.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm not going to be going on the road for a long time because CNN wouldn't put me out there in the streets with no vaccine.
They don't care about you like that.
And then we had
I'm not Anderson.
And then we had a Zoom brainstorm, and we literally both said, what about an activity book? And I thought that was a ridiculous idea. It actually is a ridiculous idea. But he had it too. And again, that really comes from, we were also home with our kids. So we both have young kids. Yeah. Our kids weren't in school. We were seeing them on Zoom every day, watching teachers try to figure out how to teach them and keep them engaged. They all have these activity books, the Brain Quest books that keeps their brains fresh. So it was like, nothing else is working. Like, what other angle do we take to get at people, and how do we get them actually engaged with this material? And let's just go back to elementary school and do some games.
I mean, to me, it's also the thing, like every adult who takes a kid to the dentist and sees Highlight Magazine picks it up.
That's right.
You're like, let's see what Goofus and Galan are up to these days. Like there's a natural sort of pull towards activities. We're a gamified culture. Everybody's got games on their phone. So I think it's a ridiculous idea that makes sense in the current environment. It's just the idea that anti-racism would come through this way, which is why it was like, we need to make sure it's funny, but it's not fucking around.
That's right. Ooh, funny, but not fucking around.
Yeah, that's our unofficial tag. They wouldn't let us put it on the cover.
Be a t-shirt.
Yeah.
Oh, why not? Okay, anyways. Yeah. I love this activity section called Know Your Lane. It's so good. And let me tell you why. I think one thing that really keeps people from getting involved is they think they have to do a thing that they don't have to do, right? Like you assume, right? Okay, well, I can only be effective if I'm like in the streets or if I have all the language or blah, blah, blah. Tell me about, this is so good. Tell me about this section and why you all decided to include it in here. Getting to know your lane.
For that exact reason, that I think a lot of people think, okay, I want to do something, I want to make a change, and they have this idea that activism is something that they're not, that it's a new thing you have to do, that you have to become something else, and that activism looks and sounds like a certain thing. And then maybe that's like being in the streets and leading the protest or starting a nonprofit, or basically reinventing the wheel and doing something outside of what already exists in your life. So we wanted to get at that. Again, every idea that we had for this book, we were like, okay, how do we make a game out of it? How do we make it playful? So we thought of the phrase of people saying like, just stay in your lane, which is kind of like often used as a diss. Like, okay, you're doing too much, stay in your lane, like stay over there. And so our idea was actually your lane is incredibly powerful. Like you can have the most impact in the lane that you're already in. You don't have to do something entirely new. So we made the activity, and it's got a bunch of questions where you're looking at like, what are your lanes? We all have them. It's like, it's where you work, it's your neighborhood. If you're a parent, it's like, all your mom friends. Yeah. It's your community, it's your church, right? It's your family. So like, where's white supremacy showing up? Because it's 100% showing up in all those lanes somehow. What are you already doing? And then what power do you have in that lane? Because I think that's part of it, is that we often have more power than we think that we do, right? Like maybe we're not out in the streets, maybe we don't know a bunch of activists, but you have some pull and some influence on some folks in your world. So who are those people? Who do you know? What are your resources? And what do you do within that space?
All right, y'all. That's it for our incredible program tonight. Please join me in thanking and appreciating for doing the work W. Kamau Bell and Kate Schatz.
Thank you.
Thank you to the Auburn Research Library for hosting us. Thank you for Terrace Books, for making sure that there's books. There will be books that are available for you. So if you don't have your copy, go get it.
They're all signed.
And that's also it for Lady Don't Take No. We appreciate you joining us. Kate, Kamau, tell the people who are listening how they can follow you and your incredible work on the socials.
I'm at Kate Schatz on the Instagram and the Twitter.
I'm at W. Kamau Bell on the Instagram and the Twitter.
There you go.
I love it. And don't worry about what I'm on. Fine. All right, y'all. It's been wonderful. Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.